Welcome back to this channel. This time around, we're going to be discussing some best practices for API development in Laravel, and it is very important that we talk about this because whatever we do as a developer is going to also have effect on some users of API. So why do we have to talk about this? First of it is that best practices like this help to enhance the security of your of the application. It also improves developers' experience because mostly developers are going to be the one that will be consuming your API. They're going to be using it. Then when you have to talk about scalability, it depends on the way you develop it. Scalability and flexibility can also be impacted either positively or negatively in time with the project. So then ease of maintenance and extensibility. So it is very important. All of these things we are going to be discussing will help to make sure that your project is in good shape, be it in experience, security, flexibility, scalability, and all of those things. So let's see the first thing we have to talk about here. One here is keep your URL clean. Most of the time when we are working with API, we don't think about beauty as a developer, and just like front-end developers or maybe client-side application, they always think about the user experience better, making being good, and as well the UI looking very nice. So also is it for API development. The URL is the user interface of the API. So it is very good that it is in order, it is clean, and it is not just anyhow. So you can see my example here. The first one in red is get user. You can see that the one in green, I make it I use hyphen to just make sure that the link are in order. Then one thing you also need to notice here is that my URL is not more than three levels of depth. So some of the time you may want to go break this rule, but I'm telling you, if you try as much as possible to make sure that your URL is not more than 2 to 3 levels in depth, it's also going to be a good design, a good URL design for your API. So the next one is use appropriate status code. You know, the client side will understand your whatever is happening from the back end, from the API first via the status code. So when you are doing things, be it you are creating, you are updating, you are deleting, you are anything you are just doing, make sure that the status code is very good. I mean, you are using correct status code for your responses. So just like you can see on the screen, if you have 200, that means the request is succeeded, and 201 created, 202 accepted, meaning that this 202 is very important. Let me talk about it. So if you have a situation whereby you have to talk about, I mean, you have to dispatch a job or put something in a queue in the background. So to make sure that the client side is able to get that the request is successful, you need to return something like 202 to say this request is accepted and we are doing something on the back end, then and some other ones. So the next tip we're going to be talking about is avoid exposing auto increment IDs in URL. I must tell you, this is very important. So you don't want to expose the security of your application. So meaning that you must avoid using auto increment IDs like 1, 2, 3 and all of those things in your URLs. So instead of doing that, you can use something like UUID, just like the second example here. Use something like UUID in your URL. That you are not using auto increment ID in your URL doesn't mean you are going to eliminate it from your application, because most of the time Laravel in particular has some a way of working with all of these auto increment UUID as your primary key. So you still retain that as your primary key, then you can bring up another key so that you can use it in the in the URL. Then another one here is version your API. A lot of people don't value this. Even if your API, the API you are developing, is just going to return just one record, just one endpoint, version it. It is very important because you don't know the future of the project, you don't know what may happen later. So it is very important that you version it. So put it there. The first example here, you are seeing API just like that. So now see the second one, just v1. You are just returning the user. So make sure you version your API. So it's also going to help you in backward compatibility. Maybe you want to do some maintenance, you want to add features, you want to do all of those things. So from beginning, version your API. The next one we'll be talking about is give this client some flexibility. You need to allow the client to, at least to some level, determine what they want to receive from an endpoint. So for instance, in loading of relationship, you may notice that in some endpoints, if you have to load all of the relationship, the response time may be very, very delayed. So now if you give access to the front end to at least load what they need, is going to be a plus for you as a developer. Then your API will perform best in terms of speed, or you call it performance, in performance. So, and what about filtering? So this thing, when it comes to this, you may not be able to do it easily, but there's a package by Sparty, query builder package, so you can use that one and leverage on it. I'm going to leave the link in the description. Then the next one we will talk about is standardize your response. You need to find a way to let the consumer of your API know that at any point this is how the response will look like, so that your application can work in a predictable manner. So you can define one by yourself, or you follow some best practices out there. We have one JSON API, you can follow that, or you can just follow your own, use your own. You can see the example here. You can see the example on the screen here, the record we're having. We have status, we have message, we have the data itself. That is a key holding the data itself. So you need to find a way to make sure that your responses are predictable. Then the next one is handle error and exception properly. When we are working with an API, you need to make sure that every error and exception is handled properly. Let your client know at every point what is happening on the back end. Then you need to also do it in such a way that you will not also give too much information. You not also give too much information to the client, in case some people are trying to spy on your system. Then the next one here is that you need to follow principle of least privilege. Most of the time, a lot of developers will just develop endpoints without putting rules, without applying policies and all of those things. You don't just want to do that, because you cannot trust user. Only give room, give access for people, give the least access to people. Then another thing I have to say here is that don't return too much data. Only return what is needed on the client side. If additional information is needed, you can give it out, but at a point, just make sure you are following the least privilege, the least information. Then another one we'll be talking about here is document your API well. Now, you will think this doesn't matter. In fact, documenting API is I can say it's a boring task for a developer, but I'm telling you, if you don't document your endpoint, if you don't document your API, it's more or less you've done nothing, because people that want to actually use it will not know how to interact with your API. So it's very, very important that you document your API well, document it very well. So then I think with all of these things I've discussed with you, you should be able to have a very good working guideline when it has to do with building your APIs. If you have other things you would love to share, I will say you just throw it, shoot it in the comments. You have questions, shoot it in the comments. then so that we can continue the discussion from there. Thank you so much for staying through. If you find this video so much helpful, share it with a friend, like it, and don't forget to also subscribe to our channel. Meet you in another release. Thank you.